Welcome to MFP Live. I'm Donna Ladd, the co-founder and the editor of the Mississippi Free Press. And here, as always, my co-host, Kimberly Griffin, the co-founder and the publisher of the Mississippi Free Press. Hey, Kimberly.
Hello.
So tonight, we're going to geek out about history. And we're really excited because we kind of do that a lot anyway. But with tonight's show, we have a real excuse to do that, and particularly about Mississippi history, and particularly about Mississippi Black history and hidden history, kind of, or at least lost history in many ways. And so our guest tonight is Roscoe Barnes. His official title, I'm going to call him History Geek, but that'll make sense. But his official title, or his latest title, is as the Cultural Heritage Tourism Manager of Visit Natchez, right?
That's correct.
I got that, right? And so you're living in Natchez, and you're from Indianola. Is that correct?
Well, I'm living in Wilkinson County,
but still there.
Indianola is my hometown. I commute every day. It's a nice ride.
Well,
I'm still living in Ann Moody's hometown.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I have to start with Ann Moody, because my story of finding Roscoe Barnes, I don't think you know this exactly, maybe just a touch of it, was when the pandemic hit. My partner Todd and I, the way we got out of the house on the weekends is that we went on road trips and we were trying to get to all of the counties in Mississippi. We haven't quite gotten them all, but we're close. And what we were doing is kind of chasing history, right? So I had never been to Wilkinson County or Woodville, at least not in my own memory. And so when we got down there and I realized that it was Ann Moody's hometown, and the town that her wonderful book, Coming of Age of Mississippi, was about, just a breathtaking book.
Yes.
I got really excited. I was Googling on my iPad and all of that stuff. And I kept running into your work on Ann Moody. And I kept saying to Todd, this is the guy. I mean, you were such a historian of Ann Moody. So I would like to start this conversation out, if you don't mind, with you talking about how you got into basically keeping the history and in many ways helping to memorialize Ann Moody down in y'all's neck of the woods down there, basically. So talk about that.
Yeah, sure. It has an interesting beginning. It started when I was a chaplain with MTC, Management Training Corporation. I was serving at the Wilkinson County Correctional Facility in Woodville. And I had just moved to Centerville, and I went to Wikipedia to see what famous people lived in that area. And of course, her name popped up. I had not read her book. And so in 2017, I started reading it and discovered that she wrote about the place where I was living. I learned that some of her family lived in the area. Her sister, Adeline, who is mentioned throughout the book, Fred, her brother, who is mentioned throughout the book. They both live in Gloucester. So as I discovered more about her family, I started asking people in the community about Ann Moody and the book, and nobody knew who she was. And I was struck by that. I went to the middle school to a program they had, and it was during Black History Month. I looked around on the walls. I saw the same faces that you see each February, Black History Month. I did not see anything on Ann Moody. Nobody knew anything about Ann Moody. And one day, two ladies at the prison where I worked, Miss Taplin, Miss Taylor, they said, we need to do something to let today's generation know who she was and what she accomplished. We need to do something to recognize her because people have forgotten who she was and what she did. And so I went home. This was early 2017. I went home, and that Saturday, I thought to myself, if I were to promote this as a publicist, as a journalist, as someone in marketing, what would I do? So I put together a blueprint for making her name known and for keeping her legacy alive. And we came up with the name, the Ann Moody History Project. And we decided to take baby steps to promote her. And again, this all started with the people at the prison. So inside the prison, we had inmates reading her book in a book club. By the way, one of those inmates presented an academic paper on her April last year. First time it has ever been done in the state of Mississippi. But we started with the book club with the inmates. We invited Fred Moody to come to the prison. Fred Moody came to the prison and spoke. He signed copies of the book for the inmates. So from there, things just took off, and we decided we needed to do something that would generate news. So we had a street named after her in her hometown. We had a birthday proclaimed as Ann Moody Day. Later, we had a portion of Highway 24 named after her. And we continued to do these things. And when the highway was named, of course, the Governor Phil Bryant signed into law the bill for the Ann Moody Memorial Highway. That was a big deal to us. But the inmates were still involved. One of the inmates drew an incredible portrait of her and Joan Trumpauer Mulholland at the famous iconic picture of the Woolworth sit-in. Someone sent that picture to Joan. It was drawn by one of our inmates. And when she saw that drawing, she and her son contacted me and asked if they could come to the prison. Joan said, "I would love to meet the man who drew that picture." And our warden gave permission. And the next thing we know, Joan Trumpauer is inside of our prison, and she got to meet the man that drew that iconic picture. I could go on and on. There's so many exciting things, but that's what some of the things we've done.
I'm going to ask you to backtrack just a little bit because many people hear me talk about, I grew up by basically, I was raised in a household that valued history, valued learning, and also teachers who I didn't read some of the normal books that when I got to college, I realized that other people had read. But I know who Ann Moody is. But for the people who just give us just a little brief synopsis of who she was, what she meant to Mississippi, what that book meant to Mississippi.
Yes.
And her story.
Yes, and the book Coming of Age Mississippi is a story about a young woman who grows up in poverty during the Jim Crow era. And it is a story about the suffering, all the things that she had to overcome: racism, segregation, discrimination. This was a time of lynchings. And of course, when Emmett Till was killed, that was a turning point for her as a teenager. As she said, they were the same age. And she was shaken by the experience. She said up until then, she knew that people hated her mainly, for different reasons. But after he was killed, she realized then that people would be willing to kill her because of her color, because of her race. It had an impact on her life. But Ann was driven, in spite of all the things that she suffered. She continued, she worked to excel. She excelled in sports and school. She started, when she left Wilkinson County, she went to Natchez College. And she was there a couple of years, and she went there on a basketball scholarship. She was a good basketball player. And after finishing here at the college, she went to Tougaloo. And it was in Tougaloo where she met Medgar Evers, she met Joan Trumpauer. It was at Tougaloo when she got involved with the civil rights movement. In her book, she writes about their experiences in Canton and other places where they were trying to register people of color to vote. She gives details about the Freedom Summer and how their lives were on the line. They were beaten, they were thrown into jail. She gives a description of what happened when they went to the lunch counter, the Woolworth sit-in, when people harassed them, poured condiments on them. There were a lot of people who were beaten, hurt. A lot of things happened during that time, but she was very active in protesting. There were times when she would try to desegregate the buses. They tried to desegregate, they worked on churches in the Jackson area. Her dream had been to become a doctor. That's what she wanted to be. But after she saw the suffering and she felt the agony of people who only wanted freedom, that had an impact on her life. And she decided to become an activist. And she talks about it in one of her interviews where she made a few dollars a week. And she could have had a whole lot more money if she'd become a doctor, but her heart was with the people, with the suffering. Now, if I may just share one other thing, a lot of times in the prison, an inmate would ask me, who was Ann Moody and why should we care? I said, before Ann Moody came along, there were white-only signs or black-only signs on certain businesses. You could not go through any door of any white-owned business that you wanted to enter, or restaurants. You could not eat at just any table at the restaurant. There were places sometimes where you had to come in through the back door. You could not drink at the same water fountain. I said, the fact that you can now go to any restaurant you want, go through the front door, drink at any water fountain, use any restroom, that's because of people like Ann Moody. They put their lives on the line so that you can enjoy those freedoms. Now we take those things for granted. But during her time, she and others literally put their lives on the line. And that's why what she did matters to us. And I say to people often, we are where we are because of where she was. We can do and enjoy things today because of what she did in those days. And I'm happy to say that her book, which was first published in December 1968, has remained in print from the very first day it came out. It is still in print. It's been required reading. Oh, look at that. Oh, it is marked. I like that. It's been translated in many languages. It was a bestseller, and I apologize with this ear, but it was a bestseller in Germany. It sold well in France because, you know, when she left the States, she spent many years in Europe. And she was a celebrity. She talks about one time when she got off the plane in Germany, there were so many reporters out, the cameras were flashing. She started looking around to see what celebrity they were covering. When somebody pointed out to her, you are that celebrity. And so, but the book is still around and people are still reading it. And like I say, I read it in 2017 for the first time, and it changed my life. I could not put it down. And the same thing happened with the inmate. And there's a video online of him. His name is Glenn Conley, who presented the paper on her. And he's getting ready to publish an article with other historians and scholars on her. And he hopes to soon be working on a PhD on Ann Moody. But the book, when he read it the first time, he could not put it down. And your book, looking at how it's marked up, you should see his. Anyway, let me stop. Go ahead.
Well, I have a story, a quick story I think you'll appreciate. This is actually not my first Ann Moody book. This was a one that I bought when I was running a youth media project of teenagers, most of them Black, about 3 summers ago. It's a project that's coming back. But one of the things that I did is I took Ann Moody's book and I read out loud the scene, the section of her being part of the Woolworth sit-in. And these young people, I'm not sure any of them knew about it, you know, that they didn't know the details of it. They might have heard that there was a sit-in, this or that. But here's my point about this book. And I also teach writing, right? I teach narrative nonfiction. This book is pure narrative nonfiction. I want to say that to those of you out there. It's all you're in every moment that she puts you in. And it's so beautifully done, just without a spare word anywhere. And those young people were so inspired just by that one scene that I read them about the Woolworth sit-in, which taught me a lot because I hadn't understood how long it went. That, you know, it wasn't just that they sat down for a little bit. It was all of this, you know, this belittling and the pouring the stuff on their heads. So that they got so excited that they did a whole project and a short film. Oh, there it is on the screen. Went to the exhibit that was about it because they were so inspired just by the way she wrote that. And so that's my message to people out there who say that young people don't care about our history. Yes, they do. And especially if it's told in a way that puts them there. And so when I picked it back up, when I discovered, when we went on that road trip,
Mm-hmm.
and I discovered your work. And one of the things I think was on your blog is this wonderful interview with Ann Moody, that where you can actually hear her voice. I think that was on your linked on your blog.
Yes,
somewhere.
I have the recording. Yes.
Oh man, I wish we could. I don't know that we could put the link up for people for that, but I would say go find Roscoe's Ann Moody blog and listen, because when you hear her in her own voice, it's so relevant to today. A lot of what she was saying. So anyway, this is Geek Out section 1 of this show tonight, because Ann Moody, you could tell we are all, just in awe of this remarkable woman. And I'm telling y'all, if you haven't read this book, you got to, because you won't be able to put it down, for one thing, even though it's got some really tough things in it. It's written so wonderfully. And I wish she'd have written many books, but she wrote such a classic that I'm very happy about that. So now I'm going to turn you north, and we're going to go to Natchez, because I know that your name is just everywhere with stuff that's going on with Natchez now, and you're in this official position. My quick story on that is a few years ago, over a decade ago, I was involved in an investigation that helped put James Ford Seal in prison for killing Henry D. and Charles Moore. And I can tell you, when I was kind of running around Natchez and talking to white people there at that point, almost to a person, when they heard that I was from Neshoba County, they would say to me, "Oh, well, at least it wasn't so bad down here as it was there during the civil rights movement and the Klan activity." And I kind of tell that story to set you up, because there is so much history that people have not known right there in Natchez. And yes, it was pretty bad there with the Klan, as you know. So what I want you to do, because I feel like you're living this, you're just bringing all of this truth out in Natchez. So talk about, tell us how you got going doing this kind of truth telling, bringing history to light in Natchez, and just set us up for what your priorities have been there and what you're doing.
Yes, and one of the things, and as you know, I used to be a reporter, and I always believe in following the truth wherever it leads. And a lot of times there are surprises. As a new person in this community, I wanted to meet with those who had written some good history. And of course, let me start by saying I have an incredible team here at Visit Natchez, and we work with some great partners. Without their support, none of the things that I'm doing or that we're doing would be possible. So I need to start there. But we also reach out to local historians. Sir Boxley is one who has done a lot of incredible work in African American history.
Yes.
Jeremy Houston has done some good work and published a number of books. We also worked with Kathleen Bonds with the National Park Service, and Mimi Miller, Carter Burns, Historic Natchez Foundation. There are a lot of people that we partner with and we reach out to. But in addition to reaching out to them, we talk to people in the community. We talk to families who live this history, like the Wallace Jackson family. I had the honor of meeting his son and his daughter. He was killed when his vehicle was bombed by the Klan. And it was an honor to meet them. And I've met them a couple of times, and I look forward to spending some more time with them to learn more about their story. As we move around and talk to people, there are always little surprises, little things you hear here and there. And the more you talk to people, the more you learn. And when people start to trust you, they open up to you. As you know, as a reporter, you have to be able to win people over. They have to trust you, be comfortable, and then they will open up to you when they are comfortable, when they know you're not playing games. People know when someone is authentic, when someone is real and not joking around. And I would like to think that people see me in that way. They know that I love history, I love the truth, and I can be trusted with what they share with me. And some who know my background respect me for that reason as a minister. So people have been opening up, and the more they talk, I mean, it's just, I'm like a sponge, I'm just soaking it all in. I told someone the other day that when you are a historian living in a town that's filled with history, every day is Christmas. Every day, you're that kid getting up on Christmas morning. You cannot wait to see what's under the tree. And that's how I am with this particular job. I can't wait to get here in the morning. I'm working on projects at night, and I probably shouldn't say that while my boss is listening. But when you're so excited about what you're discovering, you're no longer working, you're just having fun. And that's where I am. And so when I walk down the street, I talk to someone, they say, hey, did you know about so-and-so? Did you know about? And that's how I learned about Donna's Barbershop. I was talking to a number of people. Sir Boxley was one that told me a little, some of the history there. And he introduced me to Mr. Willie Carter. And before you know it, I'm over there talking to Mr. Willie Carter. And then other people who knew of that barbershop began talking to me. And I thought, wow, there's an amazing story here, because so many people don't know anything about the Deacons of Defense. I did not know much about the Deacons of Defense until a few years ago when I met one in Wilkinson County. When I first met him, he told me, I was talking to him about Ann Moody and the death of Walker, her uncle, who was shot to death. She mentions him in her book. And this gentleman lived down the road from the area where he was shot. And so as I was talking to him, he told me he was a deacon. And of course, my church background, I'm thinking he's just saying he's a deacon in the church and he is serving the Lord. And I'm saying, oh, well, that's great. God bless you. That is really nice of you. When I went home that night, I was reading a journal article about the civil rights movement in Wilkinson County. And this gentleman's name popped up. His name showed up and he was described as one of the Deacons for Defense and Justice. And that's when the light came on. I said, oh, that's what he meant. He's a deacon. He's a deacon. And the next day I called him up and said, sir, can I meet with you? I need to talk to you now that I know what, that you were a deacon. But anyway, so that's where it started in Wilkinson County. And so now I'm learning more about what's happening here in the Natchez area.
Well, one of the things that maybe is the elephant in the room, maybe it's not the elephant in the room, is, in Mississippi, we have had a historical narrative with our pilgrimages and that kind of thing that pulled Black and brown folks out of the narrative. And then also that didn't tell a complete story.
Right.
So with your work with the Whitley Plantation, and for those of you all who don't know, in Louisiana, there is a plantation that centers the slave narrative as opposed to the enslaved person's narrative, as opposed to the glorification of the slave system. They won't have weddings there. How do you help change that narrative? How do you do that? Because I know they're doing that work in Columbus. They're changing the way they present the historical context. You and your team are helping change how you present the historical context. And I grew up at a time where people were confused as to why I would not go to a pilgrimage. I was like, that is just insane. I'm not going. And today I will not live on a street called Plantation. There's a house I wanted that was on a street, but I could not live there. But how do you start those conversations, and how do you change the narrative, and how do you create an atmosphere where history is more inclusive and is more authentic in places that maybe didn't want to do it?
Right. Well, and that is a challenge. There's some balancing that takes place. My view is, as historians, our job is to tell, this is going to sound cliche, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There are some people with the mistaken belief that if you tell the bad, nobody's going to come and check it out. But we know that isn't the case. We see that with the Holocaust Museum. People do not go to that museum because of all of the beautiful, great, wonderful things that happened in Germany during World War II. They go because of the bad things that happened. They go because of the death, the sacrifice, the suffering, the price that was paid. They go to learn, to discover, and they come away inspired. True, it is not entertaining. You don't go to the museum to have a great time, to the Holocaust Museum to have a great time because of the news. There's a lot of pain involved. But people tell me that when they leave changed and inspired to do good. So for me, telling the good is important, but you don't stop there. You have to balance it out. You include the bad. And I think here in Natchez, I don't want to make the houses disappear. I don't want to dismiss them because of their contributions, what have you. I say tell it all. And I think you can tell it all without dismissing some. It's not an issue of, one or the other, but it's and both. I mean, we include everybody. We tell the story. We tell the story of the beautiful homes, but we also include the story of how the homes were built. There's an old saying that we all stand up on the shoulders of those who came before us. That includes the rich people of Natchez. That includes those with the beautiful homes. They stand on the shoulders of those who came before, including the slaves, including those who chopped cotton, including those who worked in the fields. And by the way, I grew up chopping cotton, so I know what that's like. I grew up in the cotton fields of the Mississippi Delta. The kids in my community, we went to the cotton fields every summer. We didn't go to McDonald's to find a job. We went to the cotton fields. So I have firsthand experience. I even picked cotton when I was 9 years old. Chopping was a lot easier. Chopping was a lot easier. But I can relate. So when I hear the stories, this is how Natchez was built. So when we see the beautiful homes, we hear the great stories, all the wonderful things that have happened, we have to admit that these things did not happen in a vacuum. Okay, so we have to tell the rest of the story. In a sense, we're like those TV infomercials where someone is presenting this great product, this incredible product. And then before closing, the narrator will say, but there's more. There's more. What we're showing you is great, it's wonderful, it'll work miracles for you, but there's more. So my view is, yes, talk about what we have, the prosperity that we now have. We can talk about those things, but we don't stop there. We let people know that there's more. And so the challenge for us is to find that balance where we can tell the story and encourage people to come and learn of the story, even if the news is not positive. Let me give you an example. Bad news that draws attention. We think about the Rhythm Nightclub Museum here, okay? We know that whole story is about over 200 people who died in a fire. They were killed, okay? So what's great about this story? People come, they are intrigued by the fact that this all happened. It was a major news story. It was a piece of history. This is important. And so even though it's bad news and it's painful, people want to know what happened. What can we learn from it? And so it's the same thing with whether you're talking about slavery, whether you're talking about the civil rights movement. And that's why we're working to put Natchez on the civil rights trail, on the Mississippi Freedom Trail, because of all the things that happened during the 60s. A lot of people don't know about those things. And so we're working to change that. We want to shine a light on what is happening. And so you asked the question, what are we doing to tell the story? Well, we're using all of the tools that we have that are available. We're using news articles. We're using magazine articles. We're using social media. We're holding special programs, special events. And we're working to bring in professional storytellers and historians to help our tour guides get the message across, to help them tell their story. We have some experts, some historians in the areas of Black history and tourism that we're looking to assist us in our community to tell those stories. So anyway, I could probably share more, but I hope I answered that particular question. It is a challenge. It's not easy, but we believe it's important. As Jesse Jackson said, a bird needs two wings to fly. When he was talking about politics, conservative and liberals or progressive, I think the same idea applies to history. We need two wings. We need the positive. We need those with the homes, but we also need those who did not have the home but played a role in building them.
I'm going to turn this over to Donna, but I mean, what you just said, one cannot put too fine a point on the idea that we're currently dealing with not teaching children, not teaching young people certain aspects of history because it's going to make them feel bad.
True.
As you know, the idea that people don't want to learn because it's hard, that diminishes the people you're talking about, as if they're going to be so fragile and so unable to digest information and use it for good because it's going to make them feel bad about, I don't know, we could do a survey of most good history books. About 80% of it is pretty terrible.
Yes.
Right? Yes. But that does not, I'm rambling now, turn it over to Donna, but it just occurred to me when you were talking about that, that's what we're hearing. Is people say it'll make someone feel bad, and so therefore we shouldn't teach it.
Right, and you hear that a lot. And when I met Joan Trumpauer for the first time, when I spoke to her for the first time, she insisted, before she came to our prison, she insisted on going to the local school district. She wanted to go to the high school and meet with students. That's something that she does it all the time wherever she's going. She wants to meet with students. And so what she did, we reached out to the superintendent, the principal, and they filled the high school gym with all of the high school students, teachers, and they allowed her to come and speak to those students. They had given the students her literature, and she spent that morning talking to them. And when she was done speaking near the end of the program, the students came and hugged her, and many wrote letters. But I agree with her. It's important that these young minds know the truth. There are so many people that have told me that they simply did not know. I've talked to white people who went to the Civil Rights Museum with me, and they were shaken. They said they did not know. They don't know how they went through high school without learning about the civil rights movement and all the suffering in history. They did not know, but the Civil Rights Museum opened their eyes.
Well, Roscoe, I was thinking about that when you were talking about the deacons.
Yes.
Because by the time I learned that the Deacons for Defense ever existed, right, was 2005, I think it was, when I was down in Natchez investigating the murders of Dee and Moore in work that helped put Seal in prison. And I went to see, and you'll know who this is, but the grandsons of Reverend Clyde Briggs, who had been very active down there, a Black preacher, who had been very active, and his son or his grandson told me that he had been a deacon for defense. And I was kind of like you. I'm like, is that like a reverend thing?
Right.
Right. And so this is my point. I'm backing up what you're saying, because I had read, by that point, I had been in graduate school and studied under Manny Marable in his Malcolm X classes, all these other things. I mean, I was fairly up on a lot of our race history, and I hadn't run into the Deacons for Defense. And I had no idea. And so, so that there was this group of Black fathers, basically. And I think the group formed in Bogalusa, Louisiana, kind of right across the border. And then it kind of spread out in the area, and they were Black men who took up arms against the Klan and against violent racists and said, this isn't going to happen, right? And there's a great story about them lining up. I think Emily Crosby, the historian, told a story in one of her books, which I read later, them lining up outside, I think it was the courthouse in Port Gibson, when the local business people were meeting to try to figure out if they're going to bring in the Klan. This is a remarkable thing to just be missing from our history. The Klan, the nonviolent movement, And then what about all these men who were just trying to defend themselves and their families? So I started asking around in that area, and some experts I knew who knew various things. And to a person, then people told me that the deacons were never in that area. So did they not know? Did they lie about it? You see what I mean? And so the fact, watching what all of you are doing there, after having been down there and heard, oh, it wasn't so bad here and all these other things, to me is remarkable. And I'm really excited about the drugstore that's being memorialized. And just because, and the other thing I'd say, then I got to kick it back to you, far more interesting.
Go ahead.
But once I figured out this, I have 2 books about the deacons back here somewhere, right? But once I figured that out, and I wrote a piece that's about Reverend Briggs's grandson, who told me, and I talked about it in there, and the young people who were on my staff at the time, black and white, were blown away by that story. And there was one young black man who was in college, who was an intern, and I told him, get into the Mississippi Sovereignty Commission files, read more about, and he was so honored to hear that these black men down in the part of Mississippi that he came from were arming themselves in this, very courageous way to stand up for their lives and the lives of their families. So when you said that thing about Joan, the civil rights activist, Trump Hour, and her talking to students, that's just it. That's these stories. They want to hear these stories. So that whole speech is to say, I am so grateful that you guys are down there just telling these stories and bringing out this truth that so many people have tried to deny all these years.
And I think one of the things that inspired me as a teenager was the story of Anne Frank. And we all read Anne Frank's diary. When I joined the Army, I was stationed in Germany. And I had the honor of visiting her home that she wrote about. And I remember how it moved me. I had read her story in our English class. And now I was standing there looking at the things that she described in her diary. Even though I was a teen, it opened my eyes and helped me to see that, yes, there is evil in this world, but you don't give up. You don't stop living. You keep doing what you can do for as long as you can. I was moved by her story. If we listen to certain people today, many of whom are radical, they don't want you to hear the Anne Frank story. There are some who deny the Holocaust.
Right.
But children all over the world are reading about that. I think children all over the world should read about the history here in America. I saw a meme the other day where they were talking about CRT because people have taken it and somehow they've tried to make it the whole thing demonic and evil. Certain people are good at doing that kind of thing. But the meme said, no, CRT is just American history. It's telling the truth about what happened. There's nothing special. They say, define it. Define what it is. And he said, well, it's the truth. It's what happened to these people during this period of time. It doesn't have to be political. It's the truth. And of course, as we all know, the truth hurts, doesn't it?
Right. So I was reading, I tried to get through all of your website, your blog. You're a Renaissance man. And so I
Thank you.
I think because I did not know about the Natchez nightclub fire until I was over 40 and I heard it on NPR. Okay. Talk about the 3 museums and the 3 projects that we flashed on the screen very quickly, because I think that is one part of history, those 3 projects that are really important And it's up as a Mississippian.
Yes.
I didn't know it. Yeah, I had it right. The Rhythm Nightclub Memorial, the Natchez Museum of African American History and Culture, and the Dr. Banks Museum. Tell us about those projects and maybe give us a little more information on even what a day could look like in Natchez, visiting those historical sites, and what else you would throw in the mix.
Yes. Well, the Rhythm Nightclub Museum, they're getting ready for their next program in April. Every year in April, during this time period where this fire took place, they hold a special ceremony, and they also award a scholarship to students who come inside the museum, review everything, and then write a winning essay about their experience. And I'm happy to say that they have invited me to speak at this next event, and it is something I'm looking forward to. But they talk about the people who passed. There were a lot of people, young people, there were teachers, people from all areas of society, those who were middle class, those who were not middle class. They were all within that 200 number, over 200, they were all killed. And Walter Barnes with his band, and he and most of his members also died in that fire. It's a sad story, but the survivors have shared their stories. They recorded some of their testimony, and those recordings are shared at the museum. And it's an inspiration, as hard, as painful as it is. But those are some things happening at the Rhythm Nightclub. They have some new panels, historical panels. They've used some of their funding from the Humanities, Mississippi Humanities Council to get that material. Now, the John Banks House, that's another important building. That is the home of the first Black physician and the hub of the Civil Rights Movement. It was the headquarters for the NAACP during the Civil Rights Movement. Dr. John Banks, being the first Black doctor, he recruited Dr. Dumas, the second Black physician. They were close friends of Booker T. Washington. There's a very famous photograph of Booker T. standing with Dr. Banks and a group of other men on the steps of this home. Booker T. Washington, newspaper reports show that he spoke in Mississippi a number of times. And whenever he came to lecture, he had thousands of people, most of whom were white. And whenever he came to the Natchez area to speak, he would stay at the home of Dr. John Banks. Now, during the 60s, the house was called Metcalf Boarding House. George Metcalf, civil rights activist, who became a leader in the NAACP, lived at the home, and he also rented out rooms to other civil rights workers. There were a number of women who went on to become famous in the civil rights movement, including I'm trying to think of her name, who became the wife of Bob Moses. Her name escapes me at the moment. But we have here locally Jessie Bernard, who was a very powerful leader. And the house is featured in this film, Black Natchez. And some of the images that you're showing now on the screen from Historic Natchez Foundation shows a picture of Charles Evers and Jessie Bernard in the house. That's the picture of Booker T. Washington there standing in the front on the steps of the house. And during the Civil Rights Movement, Charles Evers gave some of his most famous speeches during that time at the house on the front, in the front yard, on the porch. There's also the picture of the National Guard when they were called in, and you see the house in the background. Our Natchez Civil Rights Trail Committee is looking at that particular property as the place for our first freedom marker, Mississippi Freedom Trail marker. We believe that this house, because of its significance to the civil rights movement, I should note also that George Metcalf, one night, some night riders were driving through, they fired into that house. He lived on the bottom floor, and they fired into the house. Months later, his vehicle was bombed by the Klan. He survived with serious injuries, and some of these injuries he carried for the rest of his life. But when you look at all of the movement, the activity that took place in that house during the civil rights movement, it's only fitting that it'd be the site for our first Freedom Trail Market. Now, this has not been officially approved by the city or the Preservation Commission, but our own committee is moving in that direction, I'm happy to say. Oh, yeah, and then the other museum, I'm sorry.
I love history.
African...
You got to give me the whole lay of I got to get my day planned.
Well, yeah, and so some exciting things are also happening. And I mentioned the if I may just go back to the Rhythm Nightclub, I shared an article today. I wrote an article for Good Grit magazine about the Rhythm Nightclub. It's going to be in the May issue, so it should be out in a few weeks. It's a national publication, and I'm really happy that they gave me that opportunity to write about the Rhythm Nightclub Museum. So, and I hope the viewers would check that out on the website when it comes out. The other thing I want to talk about is the Museum of African American History and Culture. And I think you probably saw the story about the Black Butterfly exhibit, Daisy Newman. We wrote a press release about the exhibit back in February, and we are happy to say it was picked up by the Associated Press, and the story went national. And she was a famous opera singer, and that's just one of the many things that are taking place in that museum. Mr. Jeremy Houston, local historian. Yes, that's the picture. Her sister donated, she died last year, and her sister donated this particular portrait to the museum. And so they put together a very nice, wonderful exhibit about her life history as a famous singer who had an international impact. And she grew up right here in Natchez. Jeremy Houston, back in February, he did a reenactment of Prince Ibrahima, and he's done that before. He's also with the Speakers Bureau with the Mississippi Humanities Council. Those are two programs, and there are others planned for this year that the museum is working on. The museum provides history dealing with going all the way back to the very beginning. It includes Civil War history. It includes history of the U.S. colored troops. It includes the works of Sir Boxley, Richard Wright. It includes all of these people and pieces of history. And there are a lot of people that come in from the boats, the river boats. They come in when they're going through Natchez. They're sure to stop at that particular museum to get a taste of African American history. That museum was founded by a number of Black women here in Natchez. And it's wonderful to see it growing. There's some new things happening. I was just talking to Bobby Dennis, the executive director, and he and I are working on an article for the Arkansas Review about the museum, what it has to offer, and some of the special things that they're doing.
So, Roscoe, talk a little bit more. We did a story, Aaliyah Veals that came down. She's just coming to our reporter, cultural.
I'm losing you.
I think Donna froze, but what she wanted to ask you about is to talk a little bit more about the Colored Troops Memorial. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I know you were instrumental in that. I haven't had a chance to see it. I'm excited about it and was just thunderstruck when I saw all that you had done in Aaliyah's reporting. So please be sure to tell us more about that and how that came to fruition.
Yes, what we're doing, and I had just come to Natchez and just started working with Visit Natchez when I heard about this committee that was working to honor more than 3,000 Black men who served with the U.S. colored troops. And I was invited to be a part of the committee. My executive director, Devin Heath, is on the committee. And so we're both working, doing everything that we can to tell the story. And at the same time, we have specific things that we're doing. Let me just back up a bit. Robert Purnell is the chair, and Carter Burns is the vice chair. Then we have several subcommittees that are working. Of course, I'm with the subcommittee that deals with marketing and public relations. The executive director for Visit Natchez has been working on the site selection, and they have selected a site, which is exciting news. Lance Harris is working with the design committee, And we have Deborah Fontaine, who is in charge of the history research subcommittee. So all of us are working together to get this monument built. As I said earlier, there will be over 3,000 Black men who served at Fort McPherson here in Natchez. And the honor will also include those in the Navy who were born in Natchez. The goal is to erect an impressive monument that will honor them and that will also bear their names. Now, according to Mimi Miller with the Historic Natchez Foundation, she believes up to 90% or more of the African Americans within the Natchez Adams County area are descendants of these colored troops, but they don't know it.
Wow.
And so what we're doing, in addition to trying to tell the story about the sacrifices and what these troops did, they came from 6 regiments. And one of the regiments played a role, the 58, in tearing down the forks of the road dens, the markets, the places where some of them had stayed a slave, and they played a role in tearing it down and then using that lumber to help build Fort McPherson. Okay, so in addition to telling the story about what these brave men did for freedom, we also want to help the local community and others to determine their relationship with these men. And so on the website, which is at natchezusctmonument.com, you can go to the page for descendants, and there are 3 steps given that will help you determine whether or not you're related, if you are a descendant. And those steps are easy to follow. So if you believe, or you just want to check to see if you are a descendant of one of these brave men, you can go to the website and follow those steps. And I should note that those steps were provided by our historian with our committee, and that's Deborah Fontaine and Denise Griggs. They've been very helpful in guiding people in this particular area. Now, at this point, we're in the fundraising phase, and so we've had some events to let people know that we are now raising money. And again, they can go to the website. It's very easy. Anybody who wants to make a donation, they can do so with just a click of a button. They can do it online, or they can also submit a check to make a donation.
Well, I think that the spirits around me froze me when I was trying to say that I had no idea when I edited that story about the U.S. colored troops, and that was just, again, just kind of blowing my mind. We're kind of getting to the end of the show. I do kind of feel like, you mentioned Sir Boxley earlier, and you've just mentioned the forks of the road. Could you, Sir Boxley, for those who don't know, he's probably the most passionate man I ever met 15 years ago. And you know what I'm saying. But he fought long and hard for Natchez to truly recognize and memorialize and explain the forks of the road slave market in Natchez. And now there's a really impressive monument on the site. And I think it just used to be a smaller memorial. But if you would say a few words about Sir Boxley and what the forks of the road, you started referring to it, but just talk about that for a couple minutes, if you will.
Well, yes. At one time, it was the largest slave market, one of the largest slave markets in the South, second only to the slave market in New Orleans. And between 1833 and 1863, thousands of slaves were sold at that particular location. But things took a turn when Vicksburg fell in the Civil War and the Union Army came down south. And a lot of the slaves fled for freedom. And when they saw that they had an opportunity to fight, they gladly did so. They joined the military, fighting for the Union. Now, this is, I think you can say that this is really Sir Boxley's baby. He's put his whole life into it. And
no doubt. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, and in fact, I even have a booklet I just picked up from him. He gave me one of his booklets the other day that he had written about it, and I had not seen it. He and I talked different times throughout the week, And of course, now he has watched this thing grow from a little spot in the city to becoming part of the National Park Service. And that's a tremendous accomplishment. A dedication service was held last year. And as you all are probably aware, the New York Times sent a reporter down to cover it. And it was also picked up by the AP. And we get calls about it all the time. And it's mentioned in documentaries and what have you. So a lot of people are learning about this important place. And I believe that the National Park Service has some great plans, great ideas for this particular site. I don't know of all the things that they're looking at doing, but I can assure you, within a certain amount of time, I don't know, maybe in a few years or so, you will see a lot more than what we have there today. Today, you have some historical panels that are telling the story. You have an area on the ground where there are metal shackles embedded in concrete. Now, when I first saw those shackles, I was told that they were the actual chains and shackles that were worn by the slaves. I have since learned that they were not, but they are replicas. But you can still get the idea of what it was like for those men to walk great distances in chains like animals, to go there and to be sold off, women losing their children, fathers separated from the children, families broken up like animals, sold like cattle. It's a sad story. And when I knelt down to touch that metal, I felt something. I was moved. It was similar to the experience I had when I went to Medgar Evers' house and when I went to the Civil Rights Museum. You don't want to do both of those in one day. I made a mistake. I went to the Medgar Evers' house that morning, and that afternoon I went to the Civil Rights Museum. And when I went in, I saw some images that I just broke down. I was in tears. I couldn't hold it. It was a very moving experience. And I felt something similar at the forks of the road. I looked at the panels, I saw the images, some of the illustrations, and saw how we were sold. And I think only by the grace of God that I live in this day and time, because had I lived then, I would have been one of those who was sold. And so when I walked over then and just stopped for a moment and touched those shackles, it hit me. It was a very powerful experience. And I'm grateful to the work that Sir Boxley has put into this project and all the others who have supported him.
Well, I do recommend that everybody visit Forks of the Road, but now people are going to just have these amazing tours based on what you guys are doing, places to visit. You can follow the breadcrumbs, the joy, the pain, the resilience, the hope, all of it, there in Natchez, because, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of history in the whole state, but it's very rich in Natchez, where a lot of riches resulted from the kinds of things that we're talking about. So, yes. So, Roscoe, this has just been incredible. It's kind of gone exactly the way that I thought it would. We all geeked out about history a whole lot because that's who we are, and we are not apologetic about it.
Right.
And I'm serious. I'm personally grateful for the work that you and the others are doing there, that Sir Boxley has done for all these years. I know Kimberly is, and just the more people we can get into Natchez, let's just say for something other than the pilgrimages, would be very good for the economy, for our state, for our knowledge, for our understanding. And so what you're doing is so valuable there. I know you're really busy, but anytime you want to send a little something about something to write, then you're a great writer and you're a former journalist, and we would be honored to publish you as well. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you. It's been an honor, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, thank you so much. And to the rest of you, thank you for being here. Please remember, you can share this program later on YouTube as well as MFP Live. So please get the word out about this amazing work that's going on in Natchez. Also, Kimberly and I are kind of announcing officially that tomorrow our Spring Solutions for Mississippi fundraising campaign starts. We are a nonprofit media outlet. So this is our spring campaign, and it's head-on focus for the funds that we're going to be raising is to bring in more reporters, be able to who are going to be helping us with solutions journalism, cause solution journalism in counties across the state, including the ones that we've been talking about tonight: Wilkinson County, Adams County, Franklin County, all of just the whole state. So anything that you guys can do to give during the spring campaign is going to be going on a couple months. mfp.ms/donate. We most appreciate it. So, and my writing talk. This is the other thing that I have to mention is it's a member event. So if you are a member, an MFP VIP club member of the Mississippi Free Press, which means that basically that you've given a minimum of $10 a month or $100 a year. You can find out more at this URL. But I've been giving a series of writing classes, or not classes, actually talks. And I'm about to do talk 4 on April 26th, and we're finally getting around to talking about actually writing. And if you're a member, you can watch and listen to the earlier talks in the series. And then the 5th talk after that will be the rewrite and polish stage. And that one will be in May. So we've been having a really great time at these talks. So I hope that you guys will join us for those. And I'm told that we don't have an MFP Live next week. So we will see you guys in 2 weeks. And we really appreciate you. Keep reading, and kind of keep raising hell out there. Let's get the information out. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Roscoe. We'll see y'all soon.